Thank you. Wow. And thank you all for coming. It really does mean a lot to everybody that people come to these things. It does, yeah. The way the stove works is important at every level. So thank you. Really, it does count. Okay. Well, Lindsay, that's you, mine. Well, Lindsay's already said what we're talking about, so I'm going to start with some highlights. So that's our year in numbers. We do our best to count what we do. So 264 individual activities open to the public. That's the sort of things that we do of an evening. And huge shout out to Sal and Meg and Leanne and that kind of production team that make all that happen so seamlessly, and the cafe staff. I hear you didn't hear your shout out before, Jill, so you get another one now. And the guys in the cafe really do work across our projects. They get involved at every level of what we do, which is fabulous. So a total number of 10,417 people came to our stuff, and of which 6,835 were active participants. And then in terms of like what we do we pride ourselves on being able to support a creative sector around us, the freelancers. So we have, in the last year, we have given out 178 individual contracts, which had a total value of 187,000. And great news this year that 42% were to people that we haven't commissioned before, and 31% were people under 25. So that you can see what a difference that makes in a small community. In terms of the things from this year, there's kind of too many to list, but I mean, I think the notable stuff, I would say, the launch of what we do now as a region-wide network of community organizations and creative freelancers. Wild Goose Festival, 10-day festival of nature, creativity and place, which is going from strength to strength. This is our 4th year of that, and it's a sort of key platform where we showcase the work of groups and support people to widen their impact and their networks. Nithraid changed this year with finally we found other people to help take on Nithraid. So the amazing organization EcoArt, the ecological charity, have taken the lead on Nithraid now. And we have other partners there called the Biosphere and Crichton Carbon Centre. So we're now in a lovely position where Nithraid is something that we can add work into instead of having to sort of like hold the whole production of that river festival. It's notable this year as well, I think, have been our exchanges. So we've got a long-running exchange with Vestfold region of Norway and the Kunst Center there. And this year has really come to fruition, the relationship with Workhouse Union in Callan in County Kilkenny in Ireland. So 3 members of our team have gone over there this year at different times to learn from that place, and 3 of their people have been over here. But they feel like friends now. It's kind of like a sort of family, and it's great. And they came to the Parliament with us. We'll talk about the Parliament a bit later. And we have an exchange now with Findhorn Bay Arts in Murray. So Sal's just been up there with a heritage project. We're going to put on a heritage project in Murray in March, and they're going to come over here for the Wild Goose Festival next year. Creative Stranraer, we've been incubating a new organisation for Stranraer, which we'll talk a bit about later. We finally finished the fountain, yes, which of course everybody in Dumfries loves. Don't they, Simon? Yeah. Creative Spaces, our Young Creatives project, the Lochside Cabin, which I think is a notable, it's a porta cabin that's been installed and fitted out as a community creative space in Lochside that grew from our What We Do Now project and is up and running now. And of course, Open House. Most of the events that we do through the year are in the cafe here. So we've got Sonic Labs, Right, Delicious, Dune Gamers, Climate Kitchen, Nith Life, and other activities like the Women's Signwriting Squad and Speaking Queerly. So highlights. Then moving on into where we're going, we have just published a 3-year business plan, which is founded on our creative placemaking practice. Now, through our first 10 years, we developed an idea of creative arts, creativity and arts activity as a tool to work with communities to help develop new ways of thinking about and shaping the places where people live. So Mid-Steeple Quarter across the road is obviously a big example of that. And what we discovered was that working in that way made lots of opportunities for creative freelancers. So the more projects we did with communities about places, the artists were working on making those projects happen. And that helped grow a thriving creative scene. So we talked about with a number of opportunities that we're creating. And as that grew, the creative scene added more momentum to the changing places. So you can see it's this kind of like multiplier effect. So that's what we call the combination of all that creative placemaking. There's our ambition for our 3-year business plan, to create a step change in the creative sector in Dumfries and Galloway, aiming to work with communities and other partners to make the region a centre of excellence in community-embedded creative placemaking, where creativity works across all sectors as a foundational element of the well-being economy. And we're doing that through two ways. Strand 1 is community-embedded practice for and with the community of Dumfries, with 100 High Street as a venue and a production centre, where we sit now. And the second strand being the regional creative placemaking and sector development. Now, a lot has been talked about money already tonight. Lindsay talked a bit about the Creative Scotland funding situation. We are obviously in a position where we cannot just be dependent on one funding source. And part of the work of the board and the team has really been digging into the idea of like, how do we diversify where we get our funds from the work that we do. So we are now working across 4 different strands of income that you'll see down there: cultural funding, social, economic, and environmental and economic funding, commissioned and other earned income, and self-sustaining projects. Cultural funding is things like Creative Scotland, so the dedicated stuff for art work. And we think of that a bit like you'd think of like diluting juice, that we get that's really precious, and we get a bit of that, and then we expand it out by adding money from other sources. The social, environmental, and economic funding is because the way the Stove works with things like regeneration and working with mental health and isolation, we are seen to be people who are having a positive effect on the communities around us, even though we're doing it with art. So we apply to those kind of funds as well. Then the other ones are not funding, so commissioned and other earned income. That's something that, well, obviously the cafe is earned income, and we rent out spaces in the building, but more and more we are actually being commissioned to do the placemaking work. So examples like what we're doing in Stranraer. We're working with the White Sands project in Dumfries at the moment, and we've been asked by the council to look at working with them on active travel. And what we're doing there is that they're basically commissioning us to do community engagement for them. A lot of these large capital projects, the folk from the council are sitting in their office drawing in funding, but they have no real means of connecting with the people that they're doing those projects for. And more that's important to them because of the way that they get their money. They need to show that the community are in support. So what's happening in Dumfries and Galloway, which is really, really interesting in a national context, is that they're using cultural projects as a way to do that bridge work between communities and the strategic funding. So that is a really valuable new income source for the Stove, and is allowing us to be commissioning artists. Like in Stranraer, we commission artists to be artists in residence to the waterfront project. So they're doing their art practice, but it's having that impact of growing community participation for the capital projects. The self-sustaining projects are things like the Wild Goose Festival is a good example, where you're working with partners who have their own money and their own needs to deliver work, and we're providing a platform for that. So projects like Nature Scott, who need to show people nature, they can use the Wild Goose Festival as a platform for doing that work, and we can market the opportunities and widen the kind of people who come to their projects, which is a great way. We don't then need to raise the money for that. We just coordinate the partners, and they put a little bit of money into the middle that pays for the marketing. That's the theory. It doesn't quite work like that, but it's getting close. I won't go too much into it because you probably can't see that down there, but that's the sort of line of our income according to the Creative Scotland, our history with Creative Scotland. We started with a sort of like tiny fund there. We grew, this is our income, and that's the grant that we get from Creative Scotland. And the reason that we put that graph in is it shows that this big bump here, that was during COVID when we got money for Culture Collective that really allowed us to invest in our team and get us to this point where we feel we've got the team that we need to work. And this is what we're proposing in terms of, this is part of the application that we made to Creative Scotland. That's the level of support that we feel we need from Creative Scotland in order to be operating at that level of income there. So if we take those two strands that we were talking about the community embedded practice and the in Dumfries, and the regional creative practice, that gives us the four actual elements of our programme. So we've got the Stove venue over there, we've got the Wild Goose Festival here, and we've got creative spaces that are all happening within the community embedded practice in Dumfries. And then the regional practice, we've got the What We Do Now network and the work that they're doing, plus we've got Creative Stranraer and Creative Calaverock. We'll talk a bit more about some of those later, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. Sure. Where do we go next? Okay, yeah, and across all of that work, these are what we think of as our cross-cutting themes. Engagement with our community, fair work with people that we work with, equalities, diversity, inclusion in the people that we work with and who work for us, net zero, partnership working with other groups, the way that we communicate what we do, the way that we govern what we do, how we think about risk, and how we think about measuring and evaluation. And we have policies and ways of working around all of those things that then get embedded in the individual projects that we do. So, next phase, part 3, is what's going on around us and how do we fit into it. Again, Lindsay kind of set some of the scene for that. If you think of where we are regionally, and it's really lovely to have Rebecca and Melanie in the room, because one of the big regional projects that's going on at the moment is the cultural partnership, which hopefully everyone will hear a bit next year. You might all be going, what, at the moment? But next year it will all become clear, because there's been an amazing amount of work going on in the background. This is 3 years ago. Was it 3 years? When did the cultural strategy come out? 4 years. 3 years, 4 years. Anyway, we've got the region's got a cultural strategy, and the way of delivering that cultural strategy was to form a cultural partnership to oversee the delivery of that strategy. And one of the key ways that that partnership was going to work was to support a number of thematic groups about how culture works with health, how culture works with place, as for example, and education, and in that way draw more income into the cultural sector through those relationships with the cross-sectoral people in health, education, regeneration, etc. So that is something that we're really proud to have been part of, and amazing news from the Stove development point of view is that 3 weeks ago, Catherine, our development director, was appointed as the chair of the cultural partnership, which is an amazing journey for Cat. And I don't know if I'm allowed to tell people this, but the person that Cat beat for the job was a former head of the Arts Council. She's like, how cool is that? I can say that, you guys can't say that. And also, one of the other things that's going on in the region is the new, well, it's not new anymore, the South of Scotland Enterprise, who have their regional economic plan, and we're delighted that they think of culture and creativity as a big part of how the economics of the region should work. They've just recently published their renewed action plan, which has 9 action points on it, and one of those 9 action points is culture, creativity, and specifically creative placemaking. So that's good on the South of Scotland really for putting creativity as part of the economy. Nationally, this is 3 weeks ago in the Scottish Parliament. So Kat's down the front there and Angie from Lift. This was a parliamentary reception in one of the committee rooms that we hosted along with our local MSPs, Colin and Emma. And this is the head of the Irish Arts Council, and that's Rosie, our pal from Callan Workhouse Union. And that's Helen from Art 27 in Edinburgh. And together, really, we presented a case at the Parliament about the fact that culture in a community setting needs to have a separate strand of support in Scotland. Currently, really, the way that we think about culture is we fund professional culture and then we try and educate other people about going to see that professional culture. We've never been really very good at growing culture in communities ourselves, and that's not been properly funded. So this was the point of this reception, and it builds on a committee report that the Scottish Government put out about culture in communities, and we're really hopeful that we can keep pushing that point. Of course, that might not be led by Creative Scotland, that other new strand. So currently we've kind of like got one foot in both camps. We've got a foot in the Creative Scotland camp, and hooray that they got given some more money yesterday for multi-year funding, but we've also got a foot in the what might also happen in terms of funding culture in communities.